It's a new day. It's a different day in the Big Ten. It's early signing day with a lot of these schools. And when I look at this thing from 10,000 feet, there's a lot of change, but yet there's a lot of things that are still the same. You still need to recruit really good players. Okay, for all of the talk about the transfer portal, you still need to recruit at a high level. Look at the teams that are contending for national championship after national championship every single year. These aren't teams that exactly rank the highest in transfer portal rankings because they rank the highest in recruiting rankings. The foundation, the roots of your program still lies on signing day. Before I break down any teams or headlines or storylines within early signing day, here's what I want to talk about first. We need to move this thing back, okay? Because from 1 year from now, on early signing day, we're going to be playing a first-round college football playoff game in the 12-team college football playoff. Like, there's so much jammed into December now. Okay, you've got transfers, you've got bowls, and now playoffs, right? That's going to be moved up. I think 1 year it's going to be December 19th, that first Friday game. So I just think signing day is the thing. I understand why they have it in December, but that's a thing that needs to move back, I think, to February. Look, this is a 24/7, 365 profession, college football coaching. I know that. I understand that, but I think a lot of people agree with me, and this thing needs to get pushed back, right? I don't think you're going to change having transfers in December just by the way of when the season ends and how the calendar works. I think that fits in December, but just having all of that, including recruiting in December, I just don't think it's going to work going forward. All right, let's get into some of these storylines on some of these programs across the Big Ten Conference. First one I want to talk about is you can't talk about signing day unless you talk about Dylan Raiola and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Of course, we've been talking about this for a solid week. We've been talking about this for a solid week and a half. We know how good of a player and how much of a difference maker he is going to make in Lincoln, Nebraska. We know that. We get that. But I believe the last two classes for Nebraska has really laid the foundation. I compared it to a cake. There's many layers and many parts to a cake, and Dylan is the icing on the cake. You look at last year's class that Matt Rule was able to solidify. A lot of those freshmen played this year. Jalen Lloyd played pretty good. Malachi Coleman got onto the field at wide receiver. Look at the defensive line. Guys like Cameron Lenhart and Princewell Uman Mielen. Like, there's a lot of guys that played and played pretty decently when they were in there. And then you look at this year, Carter Nelson playing 8-man football up in Ainsworth, Nebraska. Like, you look at Thomas Fedoni, who's playing pretty good right now at the tight end position for the Huskers. And then you look at Carter Nelson, who's a very athletic, might have to beef up a little bit, might have to put on a little bit more weight if they want to use him in more run blocking situations. But in terms of a pass catcher, in terms of being athletic, this could be pretty good back-to-back tight ends for Nebraska. Iowa's still tight end U, but Nebraska may be catching up just a little bit. I'm going to insert something quickly about the Iowa Hawkeyes. Their top 8 players in the state, 7 of them are going to be playing in Iowa City, Iowa. Who's the one? It's number 1. For the second consecutive season, the number 1 player in the state of Iowa is not going to be playing for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Remember last year, it was Caden Proctor, pretty close to signing day, flipped his commitment to Alabama, and he's playing right now for the Crimson Tide. This year, it's Grant Bricks. Now, it's not one of these last couple of week flips. He's been committed to Nebraska for a long period of time, but this is the second year in a row. Not only the top player, but an offensive lineman. That's a position that Iowa has felt pretty darn good about in the past, right? They've developed really good offensive linemen. But for the second straight year, they're going somewhere else, this time across the river over to Nebraska. All right, let's move on and talk about the Buckeyes of Ohio State. This is a program that took a couple of hits in recruiting. We talk about 5-star defensive lineman Justin Scott, who a couple of weeks, maybe a month, something like that ago, he flipped his commitment from Ohio State to the University of Miami, and the picture he posted on social media had a wad of cash. So we all know kind of what drove that, and that's kind of what Miami really pushes down there is backing the Brinks truck up and trying to dump some NIL money to try to get these guys down to South Florida. But they lost him. And then on signing day, they lost Jeremiah McClellan, a 4-star wide receiver making his way to Eugene, Oregon. We'll touch more on that here in just a little bit. But that may seem like a hit, maybe for a lot of other programs. But for a program like Ohio State, you can still remain the top recruiting class in the Big Ten. Because for them, there's a reason why they're called wide receiver U. There's a reason why they are where they're at, because even though they lose a high type of 4-star player like a Jeremiah McClellan, you still got Jeremiah Smith, who is in that Marvin Harrison Jr. type of territory, and you still got Mylan Graham, 2 5-star wide receivers making their way to Columbus, Ohio. These guys are fantastic, especially Jeremiah Smith. And then you looked back to last year, right? They recruited a bunch of great wide receivers. You look at Carnell Tate, you look at Brandon Innes as well from a season ago, and Ohio State. They're doing just fine at the wide receiver position. They're always going to be doing just fine at the wide receiver position as well. And then you kind of factor in Air Noland as well. What a great name for a quarterback, high 4-star type of kid, going to be making his way to Columbus, Ohio. The top class in the Big Ten, a top 5 class nationally. The Buckeyes, yeah, you're fine. You're going to be doing all right. Let's talk about that school that took away Jeremiah McClellan. Let's talk about the Oregon Ducks. Wow. This was last year. This was a top 10 recruiting class from Dan Lanning. This year it was slated again to be a top 10 recruiting class before they flipped 2 4-star wide receivers on signing day. We just talked about Jeremiah McClellan flipping from Ohio State to Oregon. Ryan Pellum flipping from USC over to the Ducks as well. 2 big-time additions at the wide receiver position. And this was a class where some of their top players were on the defensive side of the ball. But to be able to really pad out that wide receiver room for the future is big time for Dan Lanning. And Dan Lanning is quickly establishing himself as one of the very best recruiters, maybe not only in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. That's kind of where he made a name for himself. That's kind of where he cut his teeth as a GA, as a recruiter. That's where he kind of rose up the ranks as being a good, great, elite type of recruiter. And you're really seeing that at Oregon, a top 5 class in the country right now. And defense, right? This is a team that I think needs to get a little bit better on the defensive side of the football. You look at Aiden Breland from Mater Dei, right? A big-time high school in the state of California, 6'5", 290. The number 16 player in the country, Elijah Rushing, out of Tucson, Arizona, at 6'6", 251. Big, agile, coming off the edge. That's going to be dangerous. The number 17 player in the country. You look at Braden Platt out of Yelm, Washington, the number 53 player in the country, the top player in that state as well at linebacker. This is a team in the Oregon Ducks that is getting it. We know they're great at offense, right? It seems like no matter who the coach has been, from Chip Kelly, Mario Cristobal, Dan Lanning, they've always been really, really good on the offensive side of the ball, but now defense. Last year, there was a lot of skill positions. Mateo Uyunglele, right, was on the defense. He got some action this season, and now they're really loading up on defense once again as well. You know, something that a lot of people ask when they talk about signing, who's going to get in there? Who's going to play right away? A guy that I really look at is Quentin Martin, coming into Penn State, 4-star running back. He can do it all. He can return kicks. He can run the ball up the middle. They split him out wide in screens and sweeps and everything. He can do so many things on the football field, being versatile at a skill position like wide receiver or running back. I think that really helps you get on the field earlier at a program like a Penn State or some of these other bigger programs. I think definitely Quentin Martin can be that guy as well. Let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines. We know that this offseason has the potential to be a little bit of a roller coaster for Michigan, but they're really zeroing in on, and they've got commitments and signees from 2 really good players as well. Is it McCarthy and Corum 2.0? Jaden Davis, right? He's going to benefit from, I think, a year or two learning and developing, and we don't know who the coach is going to be. We don't know who the coordinator is going to be. I think that's still up in the air right now. Jordan Marshall is there as well at the running back position. I think these are two guys that the Michigan Wolverines are really going to zero in on, and I could see them as the future. Remember, McCarthy and Corum were not transfers. They were recruited, right? This is a Michigan program. They load up on 4-stars. Okay, they're about around the number 15 spot in these national recruiting rankings. So, and then they turn that 4-star talent on paper in recruiting classes at the high school level, and they turned it into 5-star all-conference, all-American type of players as well. On the offensive side of the ball, if everything kind of stays together somewhat in Michigan, I could see these guys maybe a couple of years from now. I think both of them, it might be a little bit more difficult to see the field in their freshman season considering the depth that is there at a program like Michigan, but I could definitely see these guys really getting in on the act and being a big part of things right away. A couple of teams that I just want to touch on very quickly. Purdue, Coy Beasley and Luke Williams back there in that defensive secondary. You got Dylan Thieneman, who had a really good freshman year this last year. I could see them really building up in the defensive secondary as well. It's a top 30 class for Ryan Walters at Purdue. They're really building something. They might have their quarterback of the future as well in Marcus Davia, right? Getting back down to that Texas pipeline like Drew Brees. The cradle of quarterbacks could have their next member. UCLA, I'm going to finish with them. 0 defensive line recruits. We know that Chip Kelly isn't the greatest recruiter in the world. We know Chip Kelly is a guy that maybe wants to go into the portal, and he said we're going to try to address the defensive line need. But we said it. I think this is a program right now, and you need to be able to build at the recruiting level. You can't rely, especially in the Big Ten, on the D-line. You need that type of guys. We'll see if there's guys in the portal for UCLA that are available, but man, they need to invest a little bit more in high school recruiting. It's a new age. It's a new day in the Big Ten, and today might be the day where teams start building their future.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.